What is good, y'all? Welcome to Culture Shift with Raven50mm, where we are reimagining radio and podcasting by merging the two together for immaculate vibes while leveraging blockchain and Web3 tools to experiment with monetization and distribution methods. Today's a special day because we got Tyler Givens in
Hello.
the building. I guess not technically in the building, but you know what I'm saying. And this Culture Shift is brought to you by the Legacy Portrait Project and the 50mm Collective. The 50mm Collective is a community of BIPOC, trans, and queer digital artists and allies that work together as we pioneer Web3 and NFTs. The 50mm Collective has a YouTube channel with tutorials and helpful info on how to get a NFT wallet set up and get started with archiving your artwork on the blockchain. And the Legacy Portrait Project is a mission-driven endeavor aimed at empowering BIPOC, trans, and queer individuals in a world often marked by adversity. The Legacy Portrait Project strives to create a haven for storytelling, utilizing visionary tools like future framing, visualization, and AR technology to uplift marginalized voices. Legacy portraits are still photographs that come to life with video narration, sharing the subject story from their perspective. The Legacy Portrait Project's mission goes beyond capturing moments in time. It's about fostering human connection, advancing social change, driving socioeconomic empowerment, and ensuring the legacy of each subject is forever memorialized on the blockchain. Right now, the Legacy Portrait Project is running a raffle for 3 people to win $1,000 off their first Legacy Portrait. You can sign up for that at legacyportraitproject.com/contact. All right. Like I said, today is thank you. I'll receive that round of applause. Today's a special day. You know what I'm saying? We got Tyler Givens here with us on Culture Shift. And Tyler is a very, very special artist and just human being. Tyler's work explores weaving traditional mediums with emerging technologies, and it explores the power of escapism as a means of deliverance and invites the viewer to confront and interrogate the foundations of our shared realities. Inspired by anime's philosophical depths, the flamboyance of 2000s fashion, and a Christian upbringing, their creations evoke themes of sex, freedom, and the apocalypse. Their work is simultaneously a tranquil escape and a confrontation, a journey into the uncharted territories of self-discovery and liberation. Tyler Givens, everybody, welcome to Culture Shift. Tyler, how are you doing? How you living? How you feeling?
I'm doing much better today. Yesterday I had a full-on spiral starting in the morning, and I feel like I'm feeling the residual spiral this morning, but knowing that it's gonna get better. And it's raining outside in LA, and I love it. It's my favorite weather here. So I think today's a chill day.
Good.
How are you doing? We made it through all those trials too, getting this started.
Okay, for real though. Well, I'm first of all glad to hear that you're doing well. Today is a great day to have a great day. So, very happy to hear that. And did you say you're in LA?
Yeah, so I moved.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's get into it. Talk about it a little
Yeah,
bit.
let's get into it. I moved 5 months ago following my breakup with my ex.
Mm,
Uh, and so it's been an adjustment because, well, I was ready to leave New York. I had been there for 11 years, but I wasn't necessarily ready to come back to LA, which is where I grew up.
okay.
So I'm back at home in my childhood bedroom, actually. And it's an interesting experience to be here for a few reasons. Like, one, I recognize that I left LA at 18, because I was running away from, I think, my family and the people here. And I studied at NYU. And then also coming back here is really special because my parents just went through a divorce. And so I'm with my dad right now, which is really interesting to both be sort of going through similar but very different experiences at the same time.
Mm,
And it's also been great because I'm closer to my family, and that's something that I've been really desiring since the pandemic, really. Um, and I've been hanging out with my grandma a lot. She wrote a book I won't say about like a fictionalized like memoir of sorts, and so I'm helping her put that together. And I've just been like on my must go on like my eat pray love like 2 month trip to Mexico City on this Sunday. And so yeah, I don't know. It's been a big transition coming back. I feel like I'm in like a positive limbo where I don't really know like what's up, down, left, or right. I think I know what I want. Um, but at the same time, given everything that's going on in the world, I'm like working on like detaching from sort of like these really absolute goals that I had, um, especially goals that I had when I first entered the Web3 space and before. It's like everything has shifted so much that I'm trying to just like lean into freedom and like being present and like just the simple pleasures, like watching the sunset. That's where I'm at.
You
Yeah.
are like literally speaking to my soul. Like I feel like we are like walking side by side on a very very similar path. But this is not about me. We will talk about more about this in the back channels. But
Okay.
wow, Ty, like like even down to like spending more time with grandma. Like literally.
Yeah. It's special.
Yo, seriously, like so special. Can you speak to um what some of your goals were initially like coming into Web3 and how they've shifted as you're in this kind of like transitional space right now, and yeah, kind of speak to a little bit about that.
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh. So one, I was like, okay, so before Web3, I was dabbling a lot in creative industry. So I worked in fashion for a bit after school. I studied photography at NYU and I wanted to be a fashion photographer. But before I went to school, I wanted to be like a cinematographer. I just wanted to make movies. But I thought that studying photography was maybe like a more streamlined approach to learning cinematography because it's focused on just visual literacy. Whereas like the film program at NYU, from what I understood, was you kind of at least like the first year and a half, you kind of did everything and then focused on what you wanted to do. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And also, I was 18. I had the most naive beliefs and delusions. I was like, I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to study photography. I'm going to become the next like Tim Walker, which I feel like I'm kind of on like I'm going, still working towards something like that, but like went around the fucking loop to get here. Weird. Um, so I was working in fashion and then I was working in post production. And throughout all of these moments, I was always like working on sets or like just like trying to learn as much as I can from every sort of person who operates on set. And so around like 2020, before the pandemic, I started writing my first short, which has not seen the light of day. Thank God. It was horrible. It was before I even knew anything about the importance of like story structure. And I was just like, I'm going to be a rebel. I'm going to write like something sexy and like bad, you know? And all this is to say that I had really high goals of wanting to like make, you know, my first feature film by let's say like 25. I wanted to have my first, I don't know, photography cover by like 23. uh I entered the space and I was like, I remember calling on my friends that were artists, and I was like, and also my ex being like, oh my gosh, like NFTs, this is the ticket. It was right after the Beeple sale. And I was familiar with Beeple's work because we would always like study his projects at the post house that I was working for. And so I was like, Beeple just sold this piece for like $69 million. Like, we're about to become millionaires. I was on Clubhouse every day for like 12 hours, just like listening to NFT tips, and uh, you know, I met like you, I met everyone, Diana, Latasha, like everyone in Jot, like in these spaces, Andre. Um, and then I remember like like it took a while, it took like a few months for me to get my first sale, maybe like 3 months or so, or maybe 2.5 months. I minted my first work in March 2021, and I think my first sale was like around the digital diaspora in like end of May of 2021. And I remember like everything was selling, all these show opportunities were coming up, and I was like, yeah, like I'm gonna become a millionaire like tomorrow.
That's how I felt.
Yeah, I know it felt so exciting, but I think I was humbled really fast. And it was a really like basically by the end of 2022, like all my sales kind of stopped. I think that was around the time that, Bored Apes, I think they dropped what in April of 21, and then by the end of 2021 they were like flipping.
Hmm.
We saw the shift to PFPs going into 2022, and I was stubbornly like still focused on like, yeah, like I'm gonna have like my big like financial break, and my identity was super attached to, I guess, like the financial transactions of my creative work. And so I kind of like crumbled. So my goals entering the space were to become a millionaire, fund my short films, live a fabulous lifestyle, be a artist rock star, and um, make films that were rebellious and like broke the structure.
And what about now? What are some of
Oh
your
yeah, and now I still want all of these things, but I think I'm just like after, so 2022 was what I call like my spiral year. I felt like I lost the sense of myself. Like interpersonally, like I was just like going through like, who am I? What am I even making? I don't like the work that I'm putting out. I feel like I'm just churning it out, like trying to keep up with this space, with the trad art world I was dabbling in. Um, Although funny enough, I felt like my works on paper, which is where I started, were way better received in the traditional art world than like my digital works were necessarily in like the Web3 world at large. Um, so like wrestling with that, I had just finished writing my first feature with my brother at the end of 2021, and we had like an amazing opportunity to have just getting feedback from like some really big power players,
mm,
and I felt that I didn't really, our first draft wasn't really where maybe they were expecting it to be. So then I like crumbled under that pressure. I just had a lot of pressure on myself. So then I was kind of like still stubbornly going after this, but around 2023, so last year, is when I started to just sort of shift my mindset from like trying to like detach myself from the like material side of things being what is of value to my work, and like really trying to reconnect with like what I want and what I want to build. Um, Not necessarily for my self to enjoy, but for like the next generations to be able to like reap the harvest of, so to speak. And then that's when I start to feel, I guess, more in my body and more in my head again. And that vision involves building systems of education for other queer and trans artists and storytellers. Um, I still want to obviously make all the money I can so I can redistribute and like properly set up um, physical spaces and as well as like digital spaces, and create my movies and build out this whole Neo Eterna universe that is like, in my NFT world. I want to be as big as Disney, but I also want to take from the Web3 model of like more equitable structures, and where we have like, everyone's getting equal pay, and like everyone gets royalties from the films, and like we can just start building up our communities that way instead of like the individual approach. Like I want to like make this so that people recognize me as this like powerful creative, and sort of ignoring the community aspect of it, because I think now more than ever it's like community is super duper important. But I think it's really difficult, at least I'm finding it's really difficult, especially having moved to LA from New York, to like foster like a IRL community. That's what I feel like I'm really missing in my life. I think it's really difficult to connect I feel like all of my friends that have similar visions are spread across the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because everyone's moving out of the US too. Well, not everyone, but like a lot of my friends have moved out of the US or have moved just to different states. And it's a challenge sometimes to build like that. And I think also it's just like build in this moment in the world, or even to keep like that momentum up, because it's like, damn, like so much intense stuff is happening right now.
Yeah, I feel you on that. And I think too, like after the pandemic, or just like during that, or post pandemic, we're just like a lot of us are just longing for connection of like, where are my homies? Like, where are my people? And then too, I think, adding to the equation of being trans and queer, being BIPOC, adding like these different things, it kind of makes and then also being in like Web3 and things like that, it can kind of be a little tricky to find your quote unquote people and like where, and just to, because in more so in a sense of like feeling comfortable and just being
Right.
like, these are my people in a sense of like comfort of like, okay, I can like really show up as myself here and I don't have to like
Mhm.
code switch or do anything like that.
The code switching, the performing, like, yeah, it was exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was definitely exhausting.
You had mentioned the world that you're building, which I absolutely love, like the characters and just like the different things that I see you share of. Um, I don't want to butcher Neo. I don't want to butcher the name.
Oh, Neo Eterna. I
Neo
think that's maybe
Etern.
a working title because it's kind of hard to say, like Neo Eterna.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it should just be Eterna. I don't know. We'll see. We'll
Right.
see how it goes.
It's evolving. It has space
Yeah.
to evolve and grow, which I also love. But can you speak to a little bit about that world in particular that you're building, and to where you're drawing your inspiration from as you're building that world?
Yeah, totally. I love that question. Thank you. So the world came about by accident. It was a really happy accident when I entered the Web3 space. Because before, so I started with works on paper, and they were kind of like self portraits. So I thought, oh yeah, I have some right here. I can show you. Okay, so for instance,
Oh,
like this
cool.
is an example of that. So when I got into Web3, I was like, oh, the market's it's given 3D, it's given CGI. Let's get into it. And so this another artist in the space, Lisa Odette, had like made a micro course on like creating your characters in 3D and like
Mm,
rigging and all that. And I was like so happy that she made that because I had a 3D background, like a very rough 3D background working with Cinema 4D, but I had no idea about like ZBrush or sculpting, digital
mm.
sculpting, or rigging really. And so I followed her course. I made my character, which was close to what you just saw, but in 3D. And then I made my angel character, which is like the first one that I put on Foundation. It didn't sell, but it was fine. And when it did sell, I was like, yes. And it sold because Diana Sinclair had put like together a thread of artists who had work. And then remember Ito, that
Oh,
whale?
that was it. The
Egg?
egg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Whoever they are, they bought it for like 0.75 ETH. And I was like, yeah. And then the digital diaspora happened. And I made my second character, which is like the princess, S in parentheses, indie royalty. And I remember when the auction went live, I was like, in Clubhouse. I don't think we were at Twitter Spaces yet, but in Clubhouse, they're like, yeah, like try to be engaging when like you're when people were like bidding on your work, blah blah blah. And so like I created this whole story that the princess was like escaping from their family who didn't appreciate that they were like non-binary, And so they were like running, and at the same time, they were running away. And at the same time, there was like this huge um, duel happening in the Coliseum. So I would like tweet the collector or the bidder's name, like, oh, like they dealt a blow to whatever collector did before them. And I was like, oh, this is cool, like this whole like fantasy world. Um, and then I think that's around the time I was like, oh, this could be like its own little universe. Like we have an angel who's like here. I don't know what they're doing yet. But then we have this princess who's just like running away from their family to, oh, that's what happened. They were running away to like the New York City of the world, which is what I called Neo Eterna, so that they could just
Oh.
be a free diva, you know?
Yeah.
And then the fourth character, the fourth piece I made was like sexy slutty demon slayer, who was like this queer, like kind of like mask person who wore a long blonde wig with like pink barrettes and had like this like dick wand that shot rainbows. And there was like in the whole tweet world that I had put together, there was like the Neo Eterna Dome, which was inspired. But I don't know if you're familiar with like Thunderdome, which was like this big hard style festival in the '90s in I think like Rotterdam, I believe. So there was like the Neo Eterna Dome happening, which is like the annual rave, and but at the same time there's like this demon takeover because I draw a lot of devils in my work or demons in my work, which I'll get into later because I grew up in the church and like the extreme morals of the church I was in were kind of confusing because I feel like there's a lot of moral gray area. I think in our lived existence, but I felt like, for instance, they're like, if you're gay, you're going to hell. I'm like, but I'm a good person.
Right.
But you know, what's the how does
Yeah.
this how weighed in God's eyes, like in that way, you know, in the God of this church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so anyway, there are all these demons taking over the rave, and then Sexy Slade Demon Slayer arrives, and they're like shooting their like rainbows and like destroying the demons. And I was like, this is fun. This is really fun. And so I kept making more and more characters. But I think those three are the core um, that would sort of drive this world. So you have Sexy Slutty Demon Slayer, who's from like this like Miami type space. Then you Pink Beach is what I call it. Then you have the princess who's like from the royal family, but like is in Neo Eterna just being themselves and like discovering freedom. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
the angel character who I created like this whole like angel academy space where like angels are trained to like protect the cosmos from whether it's from cosmic threats or from like let's say a dragon's coming to scorch Neo Eterna, then the Angel Academy would take care of that, you know. So it's very like soft world building. I'm soft meaning like nothing's fixed, but as like a new character comes along, oh, how does this like work in the world? And it's been really exciting and really fun. I feel like I've been talking about it for a long time without taking any like real action to build it. So I feel a lot of what I'm focused on now is like I'm taking a lot of writing courses so that I can properly structure the stories that I want to tell for each of these characters. But I imagine having a cartoon that is somewhere between Adventure Time and like Neon Genesis Evangelion, like a whimsical but very cerebral cartoon that follows the angel, but still features like the other side characters. And then I would like to create a video game for Sexy Slutty Demon Slayer that's like Grand Theft Auto meets Zelda, you know, so, like, something like that. And I'm also separately from that world, I'm working on like live action feature films that are contained in their own universes, but all pull from like the same themes of like exploring sex and gender, exploring um, morality with like biblical references and biblical lore, and then also trying to understand like what freedom is to me in like an apocalypse landscape. Because I feel like we're living through an apocalypse, you know. It's kind of crazy.
some sort of it, like some form
Yeah,
of, I don't know, like
great
ABC or
revelation. Yeah,
yeah.
A, B, C, or D.
Right, right. I don't know what apocalypse this falls within, but we in one of them. I feel you
Yeah.
on that. Yeah. Wow. This. Thank you for breaking that down and going into that in depth like that too, because I I really just am excited for you, and I love the parallels with like how you started in photography and like doing fashion photography and wanting to be a filmmaker and things like that. And I feel like now it's starting to like come within that cycle of like by accident, there ain't no accidents, but and now with Neo Eterna, you're creating that now. Like you're creating essentially like there's like films that can be brought within that, and you had mentioned like a video game too, and wow, just so many different avenues and different ways that you can take it. That is super super exciting. Wow.
It feels exciting, but also so overwhelming. I'm like, where do I even uh, focus? You know, 'cause that's also a big problem that I had in 2022 is that I'm like, okay, I'm trying to write feature films. I'm also participating in like Web3. I also was like super interested and curious about the traditional art world,
Mm-hmm.
works on paper and painting. And then also I want to make a video game. I'm like, okay, Tyler, like, and trying to do all that at once, it's like you need to chill and pick something to focus on, which I have a huge issue with because I want to do it all at once. But I'm realizing, I think my biggest learning is to pick something, finish it, and then move on to the next thing. Because I'm like,
I I,
for me,
I
because
kind of
I'll have five, 50, let's say 50 little things happening at once, and I don't finish anything.
okay, but okay. Let me ask you this. So while I think that is a fair approach, but as an artist and as a creative, like some things like how do you know when something is finished? Like there are, like, and okay, I'll let you speak to it. But I have some theories on that because I'm again in the same similar boat. I'm like, you know, I feel like I got to be doing this thing, and then the world also needs this thing, and but God told me I actually got to be doing this thing over here, So I'm like, um, really praying for strategy because I feel like they're all important
Yeah,
things. And
exactly.
and like, hey, you said this. This wasn't me. You said it. So like, what are we doing here, kind of thing. And if
Yeah.
you can kind of speak to your practice on like how do you go about finding strategy to work on all of these different things and um, what that process is like for you.
Okay. I'll start with what I've tried.
Okay.
So I've tried just being like, oh, I'll wake up and decide what I'm gonna do. Not for me. I'll just end up on TikTok for 2 hours, and then it's like 12 p.m. and I'm like, oh, I guess half the day's gone. I should go take a walk. And then maybe I'll get an hour in on like it's easiest for me to do works on paper because it's like very immediate. I can feel like that satisfaction of completion. I think the next easiest thing for me to do is, I guess now would be AI. Like I've been working with AI trained on or using some of my work trained against like the stable diffusion data set at large. And then, because that's also immediate, it's a matter of prompting. It feels easy um, in that it doesn't take that long to develop the skill set of prompting,
Mm-hmm.
like understanding all the back ends of what the checkpoints can do or the notebooks. And then the next easiest would be working in 3D. I mean, that's also like a bit easier, but it just takes more time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the hardest thing for me is writing. So originally I was trying waking up and just being like, okay, whatever I want to do. When I have a deadline, I can really plug in and just like finish and like work 12-hour days and feel amazing and then pick it up the next day and feel great. because usually I will, like, if I'm doing a 3D work, I usually like will do a quick drawing of what I think it should look like first before going in. I've tried some moments where I'm like, oh, let me just open the ZBrush and like, or Cinema 4D, post my character and see what comes out. I think both are kind of rewarding in different ways. But
Mm.
the next thing I tried was making my to-do list the night before. That, I don't know about that one. Because I'll wake up and be like, I don't want to do 3D and I don't want to write today. So now what? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And then lately, I think I told you this before we started, like I'm like pressing pause on my art career, but then I keep getting dragged into it. So by pressing pause, I mean I am creating a lot for myself when I feel like I need to create something, but the intention isn't for it to be shown to the public immediately. And by public, I mean like Instagram, post on Twitter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I was getting so caught up in this cycle of like creating for money or for like other people's consumption that I just started to feel like paralyzed,
Mm-hmm.
but still stuck in like this hamster wheel. Like I need to create to stay relevant or whatever the reason was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, in being like, okay, I'm going to pause in my art and I'm going to really focus on conquering the beast that is storytelling for screenwrite or for screenwriting and like understanding structure and wanting to pursue like the mastery of craft. It like that being my intention has freed me so much because now it's like, oh, I'm not writing because I want to like make the next Star Wars and like be that bitch, you know? It's like, no, I'm writing because I want to hone the skill so that I can like create impactful stories in the likes of my favorite writer directors, right? And really, yeah, just present like strong work that I know I worked really, really hard for. And I want to know that I am really good at it because I have put in all these hours with myself and with like teachers and like these little boot camps and whatever, honing this craft. Because I feel like a lot of like my other skill sets I've learned just like on YouTube and just like being like in the rat race. But I feel like writing is something that, well, it can be done and taught on your own or learned on your own. I think there, for me at least, I need some structure, and
Mm.
I need like someone who's doing it to be like, no, actually, this sucks. Like this sucks, and this is why it sucks, you know. And so now my like structure is reliant on signing up for boot camps or like intensives that are giving me homework, that are giving me feedback, and are just giving me things to work on every day. Like I just finished last month an extended reality boot camp that I started in, I think September is when I started it, and we built VR mini golf. So Neo Eterna VR mini golf is coming.
What?
We'll release that because I like the basic structure of it's done and it plays and whatnot. But I built it without a headset, so I was using like an XR simulator to like test it. I really want to test it with a headset on, and then I want to add. I'm gonna make it funky. Like it's a game, but it's really more of an art piece, and
Mm-hmm.
so. And like the difference between that, I think the game is for entertainment. The art piece is more for like I think emotional impact. I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, And so like we made that and then we did an augmented reality project towards the end. And I'm like, this is sick. Like AR, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Especially with the Apple Vision Pro. Not that I'm a fan of it, like visually. I think that seeing that in public, I'm like, eh. Um,
Yeah.
but the potential, like once we have smaller devices that can do all that function, yeah, exactly. Then I'm like, okay, cool. Let's start developing for that. That was really cool because, like, you know, I had always been wanting to learn how to use game engines. We used Unity for that, And I also decided to move my whole 3D workflow to Blender instead of Cinema 4D. And I was like, okay, this structure like allowed me to like create something sick and learn something I've been wanting to learn but been putting off forever because I'm just not someone who has, at least anymore, the discipline to like teach myself a new skill. Because in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, if I sit here and I like teach myself this software, then that's time taken away from me working on something that I know I can do like right away, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
creating a new character, dabble in AI, whatever it might be. So that's where I'm at now, is like just paying someone when I can to give me structure.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. Like being intentional with taking the time to um, cultivate instead of like just because I mean it is a cycle, and I can't speak to the traditional art world. I don't know how that go, but for Web3, like it is so fast, and you do feel like, okay, what do I got to do next? Okay, what do I
Mm-hmm.
need to put out like a I'm in the studio like creating selfie or
Yeah.
like work in progress video or like I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. Like
It's horrible.
yeah, and
Like,
then
what are we supposed to create as artists if like you're expecting us to like just be online 24/7?
mhm mhm um I would actually like to brainstorm ways of I've been starting to like build out an email list and just and even like on chain email quote unquote, but like ways that artists and creators can have direct communication with collectors on chain, preferably because
Yeah,
that's the address
completely.
we have. Like,
Yeah, you have to KYC your collectors. You know,
yeah. Oh, this has been
if
such.
you crack that,
Oh, I'm in the back. Trust me. I'm like back here checking it because again, like we just need like ways to be able to send out like and not even spamming. It's just like, hey, here's a newsletter of like boom, 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 all of the cool things that we're working on. Because also, I was going to say, and I'd like for you to kind of speak on this as well, as creators who, or let me speak from my experience. Then I would like for you to reflect on your experience. I find myself, especially now, being in Web3, um, or I guess I've always my art and the things that I create are things that I want to see that I don't see currently. Like whether it's um, a community of like-minded individuals or like um, different stories that I think are like inspiring that mainstream media aren't necessarily covering and things like that. And I'm wondering for you, you know, dabbling in so many different things, do you feel like a a sense of, I guess I'll say, duty for a lack of word to create these things so that they are in the world and that they do exist? Because sometimes I feel like if I'm not making these things, I don't know if they're gonna show up ever. Like I don't know if we're gonna see certain kinds of things. So especially with like Neo Eterna and the world that you're building, where does the motivation to create a world such as that and just like different characters that you're creating, like where is that motivation coming from?
yeah, totally. I definitely relate to like if I don't make it, then who is gonna make it? You know. But I feel like before, so like let's say like 4 years ago or something. Not 4 years ago because I didn't even start New Eterna. So maybe like 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. Um, I felt like that, but I felt like it was more like an ego thing. Like, oh, like I want to be the one who like makes this world, and like I want to be recognized for it. Granted, I when I first started creating the characters, it was because I was wanting to create from a space of joy after George Floyd's murder,
Mm-hmm.
and because I felt like my works on paper were very dark and like coming from like a super raw place.
Mm-hmm.
I think also the immediacy of like just like mind to pen to paper allows for that. Whereas like in creating in 3D, it's just like so many steps. So it's like it kind of like the intention kind of has to like be quite strong. And I think just going into it raw doesn't really work for me at least not with like character based work. Um, so I did start with like, okay, I want to make this because one, as a kid, like I wanted to see just like black characters and then like obviously black queer characters being at the forefront of these adventures and like being free and not just being there to serve whoever else is like leading the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like I feel like that intention was pure, but then it became like, oh, I want to be the one to do it because I want to be like the I don't know. I just want to be that bitch and like recognized for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became, oh, I need to make this because I need for like if future generations can see this, like the younger kids can see just like black, queer, and trans people being fabulous and looking fab, having most cunty hair and outfits while like saving the planet from aliens or from like a demon takeover and then going to a rave after and really cute. I was like, yeah, that seems like that would enact some or rather unlock some bolts in the brain from our programming here, you know, especially in the
Yes.
state. And so now my motivation comes from I guess it's kind of like all of it, but I feel like it's more balanced. Like, hell yeah, I want to like be that bitch who like made this world and like birthed it at first. But I think my intention is more focused on like the impact and building the resources from this project to create like more sustained, um, I guess like programs and communities that can take care of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
like when I'm dead.
Yeah.
And also, what does that even look like anymore? Because all these systems are kind of collapsing. Um, so I'm like, oh, maybe it looks like, you know, just having a plot of land in, I don't know, Montana that's like thousands of acres. And we have a bunch of homes there and schools. And we garden and have like combat classes so that we can
Yeah.
like in the war, like, you know, defend
For real
ourselves.
though.
Um, and we just create and have some alternative, like hippie ass way of living. I don't know. And then everything that we make kind of just gets shared amongst everyone else. And then the idea would be that everyone who has been impacted can like take their resources and then do something similar. And we just
Mm.
keep doing that. And then by some time it'll be like a totally queer trans takeover of the world.
And just more love and joy and abundance
Yeah,
and freedom is
exactly.
like, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm tracking with you. I feel it. I feel it.
yeah. And like just helping each other build and like taking care of each other, you know. Uh, New York was really intense towards the end too, because I just felt like that community is there, but it's also at the split second it could become something so vicious after being
Mm.
something so loving. I'm speaking specifically about like my queer community that was there. Um, it got really intense because you know once someone starts to pop off, then like that competition, especially in New York when everyone's just like in survival mode, like it
Mm.
the competitive mind like just pops up and then it's like claws go for them and then it just like there's a huge rip and like why can't we just like celebrate? And that's not in every community that I've experienced. Like I feel like the London kids, they they know what's up. Like they're nice and they raise each other up. Like if one person's winning, then everyone's about to win, you know?
Yeah. Yes. You said that's in London, so maybe we need to go to
Yeah,
London.
yeah.
Because I'm
Those
looking for
kids.
those kinds of folks, like because I believe that there is no competition in your authenticity. So if you are creating from your most authentic place and like self, and like I like to encourage people to, I'm like, how do you envision yourself? Like let's breathe life into that
Yeah,
version of you. Like, what do you want in your life? Like, how can I help you get it? Type shit. You know, like there's so much. It's the world is abundant and we don't have to be in competition. It's not us against each other at all. Like it is there are bigger fish up here that we need to like be trying to um not focus on, but take out for a lack of a better lack of a better term. Um
yeah,
yeah, it sounds like we might need a trip to London
yeah.
because
And I feel like someone might get mad at me for saying that, but it's just like from my observation, the London kids are doing it right. Um, and then the New York kids, we do it right sometimes. But I was gonna say something you said just reminded me of what was it? Something about the bigger fish. I can't remember. If it comes back to me, I'll bring it up.
bigger fish, aka centralized entities and networks that are like controlling all of all of these
Yeah,
things, you know, like that's yeah, there is no competition in your authenticity. You just gotta but
right.
I think what is tricky is finding that each individual finding what that like divine version of themselves or like what their what's in line with like their purpose and what they're supposed to be. That is hard.
Mm-hmm.
That shit takes time and
It's
like
hard.
really getting intentional and getting truthful with who you are because a lot of us aren't honest with with who we are. I know I wasn't for a while, so like, hey, finger pointing. I'm pointing my fingers at myself right now.
Same, same.
Earlier you had mentioned your Christian upbringing and your religious background, and I personally am on like this real. I'm not gonna. I'll say intense. Yeah, this intense like faith and spiritual journey, and really like leaning into it after just last year. We're not even gonna get into last year. I'm happy, but I'm happy we're in this year. I'll say. And so if you can just speak a little bit more on that on like your background and just like your spirituality and just how you feel within all of that and how it relates to your art making too.
Yeah, totally. So I grew up in like going to church every Sunday,
Mm.
which was like something I really appreciate because I think having like a very strong foundation in just like a practice of faith is really beautiful and like has really come into play more recently, which I'll get into. But we went to a Christian church. I went to Catholic school, so I had like I guess two understandings of like
Mm.
what religion looked like. My Christian church, it was very, I, I don't know, I felt like as a kid it was very fun and like loose, but then I think as soon as I started to like, I guess maybe around 12 or 13 when I started to just like be in the adult church and also I think being black too, like the notion of being gay or anything outside of straight, anything outside of mask was like
Mm-hmm.
very much like a hard no. Like, don't cross your arms like this because that's what girls do. Like, don't cross your legs. Don't limp wrist. Like, if you're gay, you're going to hell. Like, all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, hearing all that, so hearing, like, I guess people be demonized for what I understood as, like, I don't even know how I understood this as a kid because, like, in theory, I feel like I should have been of the same thought, like, oh, like that person chose to be gay, they chose to be trans, whatever. So like they are morally corrupt. But I didn't have that thought. I had like, oh, but they're just born that way. So if you're, because I think obviously because it was in me too. Like I remember like, being at all boys summer camp and being like, like, like this person just like touched me, like like or like they just shook my hand or like said hi to me, like oh my gosh, like whoa, like why am I feeling this way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think I was really confused because I also had girl crushes, so I was like in this like I was just a confused little kid, and so hearing all this stuff, I was like, well, I'm like not a bad person. Like I get straight A's. I'm in sports. I am good to my parents. Like I treat people kindly, but I'm going to hell maybe. Like I used to think that I would get like STDs or like uh HIV from just like jerking off. Like this is like go how crazy my brain was. And so I think I kind of ran away from that. When I moved to New York, I mean, my mom would be like, "Oh, like, are you going to church? Like, I found this church," which ended up being that church, like Hillsong or something. That's like the cool young church that I think maybe has had some scandals as of late. Um, and like, yeah, I'm going to church, but I was like, I'm not going to church. Like, I don't want to be in these spaces where I'm told like I'm like horrible and that like I
Mm-hmm.
need to like give my heart to God because of something that I did not choose, and that's just like a part of me. And so for the longest time, it wasn't that it was like anti Christianity per se or like anti God. I definitely still had like a practice of prayer, but I was like, I guess in hindsight, learning to detach it from a specific religion and understand that I believe in a higher source, God, for instance, but that God isn't necessarily like a God that's going to demonize me for my existence. If anything, I feel like they want me to experience everything on this earth. And as long as I'm not hurting people intentionally, then I'm good, I'm chilling. And so that was kind of like where I was at for a long time. And then I had some interesting experiences where I felt like I was visited by like my grandfather who had passed away, like more ancestral situations. And then it was actually at Digital Diaspora, the first one, where Diana's mom like was like, your ancestors are proud of you and like you need to keep going. And that's when I like was like, oh wow. And then we had like a small conversation about like how I can communicate with them and like giving them offerings. And that's when I started to explore more like ancestral wisdom, which I'm still trying to figure out like how to more intentionally like connect to. But for instance, I'll pray to them, I'll give offerings, I'll pray to my spirit guides. Because there's also like around my spiral year, it's funny because I kept seeing like this angel number 222, which meant to like find balance. And like towards the end of 2021. And so then 2022 happened and it was all about that. And I had all these insane experiences that like tied back to that. And so like I was intentionally like working through and against all the areas where it felt imbalanced or that I felt like I wasn't really respecting myself, my body or my mind. And, you know, I like felt like I had sort of like conquered that or like was on the edge of conquering that. And then I felt like okay, I broke out of like whatever cycle that was I was in there with the help of just like paying attention consciously to like synchronicities, asking for very direct help. Like, can you please intervene? Like, and like when I pray, I'm like, dear God, dear spirit guides, dear my guardian angels, and dear benevolent ancestors. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what happens. And I journal every day, which I think is a very like grounding act for me every morning, just like purge my mind. And then yeah, I really want to integrate more, and I'm excited to integrate more because I feel like it's been helping me to like have this. Oh, and going back to like my upbringing, I think it's easy for me to be like, oh yeah, like obviously my ancestors are here with me, and obviously there are like higher forms of energy or like spirit operating with me at all times. Like I look at my life, like I've never been sure like in lack. Like I've been struggling as hell, but something always comes around that like takes me out of that, you know.
Yep.
um, I think as long as I'm operating like in this balance, and operating like with intention and just intentionality, then like, yeah, things happen and like I'm always taken care of. And like that serves as like a reminder that I'm not here by myself and that I don't know. I think everything is just quite connected. And I think it's easy for me to understand that because of my religious upbringing. Whereas I think if I had grown up maybe without that understanding, I could maybe, it would be harder to, I imagine, to like give in to the unknown in this sense, um, or give up control even
Mm.
over like some of the things that I try to control in my day to day. Sometimes I'm just like, you know what, like I'm about to cry and like Jesus, take the wheel. I am done here. I can't. And I'm just like this.
That's so relatable because like, and especially like, I cannot stress it enough, y'all. Like, pioneering in Web3, this is nuts. Like, it gets it's so much. There's so every day is some new shit that you can or cannot learn. It's your choice. But like, either way, it's going. And so, um, oh wow, yeah. That's sometimes you just got to give it to God. You just got to be like, hey, you handle it, please. Like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
like
need
I'm
you.
going on a walk.
Yeah,
I'm done.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so true. You mentioned seeing the angel number 222 and how that reflects balance, and I was wondering if you could kind of speak to um, just briefly because I know we're I want to be mindful of time here, and I have two more questions after this one. But how do you
Oh my god, these balloons.
in these some balloons came up? I didn't even see
Yeah,
them. Yo,
that's cool.
sometimes sometimes my FaceTime cam will like throw up like a thumbs up or like balloon. I don't know. It does based on my hand gestures. I don't know what I'm doing to like trigger that.
Ah,
But anyways, um, how do you find now in today? Like, how do you go about finding balance?
yeah, I think one is, I think in my journals, like my morning pages,
Mm.
I definitely make a point to like checking with how I'm feeling. And in doing that, I've been able to be like, okay, right now, like for instance, yesterday, I'm like, right now, I feel really crazy. Like I feel anxious, I feel nervous, I feel sadness, and I feel alone. I feel like I miss my ex. I feel all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of times in the past, I've been like, okay, if I feel crazy, I need to get the hell outside or I need to socialize. And so I decide there's like a park next to me, which I never went to as a kid, like just like a state park called Kinnaton. You know where Kinnaton is.
Oh yeah. Where?
Like, obviously, you lived in LA for a bit. Okay, so
Oh.
now I'll go to Kinnaton, and it's so big. There's so many places I have not been to. So I'll just go walk around, and I'm just like, wow, nature, love it. That
Beautiful
gives me like
park.
a sense of like mental balance. But then in terms of just like day to day hustle, I am just like, okay, like I know that I work really well from like maybe 10 a.m. until 3. After that, my brain is like, it's done. It's
Mm-hmm.
not doing anything. So let me just take a step back. And if I really need to, I'll come back up a few hours to work. But I guess, like from a work perspective, I know that I can only achieve so much in a day. From a mind perspective, I know that taking a walk helps me. Sitting and breathing helps me. Making sure I can go to bed by like 11 helps me. And then making sure that I'm getting out and like pushing myself to socialize because it's easy for me to fall into like a hermit mode
Mm-hmm.
and like isolate myself. But I realize that that works against me as much as I think I'm like helping myself by doing that. I am not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm learning to like call friends when I need support, especially like going through a breakup. I'm like, I need support right now. Like
Mm-hmm.
I need to call someone. My brother's always there for me. Thank God for him. Um, but yeah, I think balance right now just listen is as simple as like just like listening to my body. Like, why do I feel tense right here?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, is it because I have a deadline coming up, or is it because I haven't gone outside, or is it because like I haven't like cried in
Mm-hmm.
days? Because
Yeah.
I'm a Pisces, and I need to cry.
I think we all need
Okay,
to cry more. You know,
yeah,
I think that
it's so
like
nice.
it like clears some shit when we
Mhm.
let like tears just like run through. I don't. Whenever I cry, I feel way more clear headed. Like I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, I can go and figure that. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
wipe that shit. And I'm like, okay, I make sense now. You know. And I also think we've kind of been like, I won't say brainwashed, but like with the pandemic, that has like um added to this notion of, oh, I'm an introvert. Like I used to say that all the time, like, oh, I'm introverted. And I think to some degree, but ultimately we're human beings. Like we need connection, we need
mhm,
people. Like even if it's just like three people that are your people, we need those connections to just like stay human. I think like if
yeah,
we isolate so much, it makes it a lot harder to just, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I feel you on that. Like I definitely, I thought I needed to like isolate and like, oh, I'm an introvert, but no, I need the homies. Like I need the connection, and now I'm like in a place of I'll just randomly call somebody or text like, hey, how's it going? Hi, just checking in type shit. You know, that's
or the random FaceTimes, like,
yeah.
please answer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um all right, so we'll get into the last two questions here. This is culture shift, and I want to know, Tyler, what does culture mean to you?
Ooh, damn. I feel like I use this a lot too. I'm like, it's for the culture. Well, I think it's like a preservation of, and like not a preservation as in like it's um, archiving or something that like has happened and like we're moving on from, but more like a preservation and like a lived. How am I trying to say this? Preserving, both preserving and living what it means to like be, for instance, black for me or queer for me, and making sure that I'm doing what I can um, with friends, like foster this like embodied experience, right? Um, I feel it has a lot to do with recognizing the history for our communities and honoring those histories, not letting those histories be warped or to die. I think that's the preservation side of it. And then I think it also has a lot to do with pushing for ourselves as individuals and our communities to like evolve with the times just for like our greater good, but also just take care of each other. I feel like that's where culture falls for me. Because when I think of like the lack of culture, I think of the lack of community. I think of individualism. I think of, what else do I think of? I think of accepting people who like accept the reality for what it is
Mm,
without challenging.
mm-hmm.
And usually those people benefit from said reality. Um, yeah, does that make sense?
Absolutely, that was beautiful.
Okay. I wonder what's the definition of
I know
culture? I'm gonna
I do the same thing. I'm like, okay, words. Let me. uh,
culture, the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. Okay, I feel something was there.
there's definitely some synergy there. Absolutely, 100%. And last question I have for you, Tyler. I guess this is a two-parter. How do you define legacy, and what do you want your legacy to be?
Ooh, another big one. Hmm. Okay, I think legacy simply is like what I leave behind for others, whether that's positive or negative. 'Cause I think a lot of people have negative legacy
Mm.
or legacy that um, oppresses others. And I believe that my legacy, hopefully, is one that uplifts many. And I think my legacy will just be like the stories that or the films that I make, the Neo Eternal universe. I would love to have built a foundation and an education system for other queer and trans storytellers, just like make it easier to exist and to just mitigate the default survival mode that most of us are in, especially our trans brothers and sisters, because it shouldn't be this hard to exist, and it shouldn't be like this hard to experience joy, to celebrate yourself, to be celebrated. I think the notion of like being tolerated is complete bullshit. Like that should be out the window. Um, so hopefully whatever I do can aid in that area. But also I'm like, with all these systems crashing, I'm like, hell yeah, like let's fucking get into the gritty of the American Revolution Part 2.
Yes.
Let's watch all of this burn. I think I'm a bit right now I have this like maybe romanticized version of the revolution which I'm working on getting rid of, because I know it's going to be really intense and there will be a lot of death and in like many ways, like ideological, spiritual, physically. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But I believe that the next generations will be like, fuck yeah, like thank God,
Mm-hmm.
that happened. Because I don't know, I wake up full of dread most days. And yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine that being the reality for the kids like
Yeah.
growing up any much longer. It's getting intense.
Well, Tyler, I mean, your artwork is already paving that legacy forward, and um, we honor you, we celebrate you in all that you're doing and creating, and thank you for sharing with us and for joining on this culture shift episode. Everyone who tuned into the live stream, thank y'all for tuning in and for
Thank you.
yeah, bearing with us with the intro there. Tyler, do you have any last words, any closing remarks?
Let's see. Last words. Look in your mirror. Be like, I'm that bitch. And it's okay to cry.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you, Raven.
Absolutely. All right. Thank y'all again for joining this episode of Culture Shift. And we'll be back on Wednesday with special guest Black Dave. Shout out to Black Dave one time for the one time. You know what I'm saying? We cooking over this way.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, y'all. Thank you again. Stay hydrated, stay blessed, and we will catch y'all on the next episode. Peace.